Good afternoon, and today I'm going to give a speech on slavery. Why were my foreparents slaves? Did they want to be slaves? When they were kidnapped from their lives, did they want to leave those lives? Did they want to leave the life of strolling along the beaches and enjoying games at life's leisure, feeling the sand between their toes? Were they not happy cooking their food and enjoying each other's intellectual conversations? Was it unpleasant for them to wake up each morning to wonderful sunshine and sweet-smelling land? No, of course it wasn't. When the Pellmen came, shooting their guns, frightening men, women, and children alike, that was terrifying. When old people were whipped and bled to death, that was terrorizing. When civilized humans were forced to live for months underneath those slave ships and stuffed below deck like sardines in a can, that was torture. When sickness, disease, and suicide was all some longed for to end their existence, that was evil. More than 1 million kidnapped Africans were thrown overboard for various reasons. That was genocide. Terror was instilled into my people, cruelly and in an inhumane way, because the slave owners were in it only for the money and did not care for the well-being of these Africans. When the number of enslaved people from the Caribbean and the Americas dropped significantly, slave masters sought other places in Africa where they could kidnap and capture more innocent people for their devilish schemes and economic gains. Was this fair to any of these people? To be kidnapped, ill-treated, and terrorized out of your worst nightmare, and then beaten because the overseer on the plantation felt like it. We survived. Yes, we the Descendants are here today. That is because Nubian people have strong spirits and goodwill. They sang songs, prayed, and kept their heads up against the oppressors who could not succeed in keeping their spirits down. They knew things would get better in time. They just had to wait for their chance. And that is what they did. Some escaped, and some waited to the abolition of slavery. We built lives for ourselves, despite being penniless. Racism was heavier than ever, but we were free. When most people speak of slavery, they say, what is in the past is in the past. The future is more important. They will not take the blame for what their ancestors did to us. They act like we should just forget it. Let me ask you, did the Jewish forget about the Holocaust? Will the Americans forget about September 11th? So why should we forget about being enslaved? Why should we forget about terrorism? Why should we forget about being kidnapped? Why should we forget about rape? Why should we forget about genocide? I ask you, why should we forget about slavery? More than 20 million people were killed during slavery, 99% murder, yet we have not been compensated. $1.25 billion has been shared between Holocaust survivors, offspring and spouses. To this day, thousands of Jewish people continue to receive thousands of pounds to account for the belongings their parents left behind in Germany when fleeing the Nazis and the Holocaust. More than 20 million black people were killed during slavery, not to mention those murdered as a result of slavery, and yet not a penny has been divided between us. Right now, French Jews are seeking compensation from the French Railroad Company because they cattle Jewish people to concentration camps in railway carriages. I am watching closely to see the outcome of this case. On March the 3rd, 1865, in the midst of the Civil War, Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton met with 20 black community workers. That night, a settlement was set. Each black family would receive 40 acres of land and a meal. When Lincoln was assassinated, this settlement was retracted, leaving these former slaves' lives once again moneyless. However, slave owners were compensated for their losses due to the abolition of slavery. Slavery was so accepted that slave owners were like tradesmen today, and their loss of slaves was like a plumber being compensated for having his tools confiscated. This mentality was and still is extremely insulting and outrageous. 10 people from America are suing Lloyd's, London's oldest insurance company, whom are responsible for insuring slave owners and their slave ships. Lloyd's say they are not responsible for something that happened long before the company's current owners were born and the prosecutors were born. People like Barclays, one of England's oldest banks, also funded slave masters and their slave ships. To this day, the Queen and her representatives have not apologized for their parts in slavery, yet they continue to live comfortably due to slavery. Some feel it's not right for descendants of slaves to collect compensation as they themselves were not slaves. So how is it okay for descendants of slave masters to still benefit from their ancestors' wrongs? If we cannot be compensated to better our lives, why can they better their lives with the money of our foreparents back? Why is it slavery has never been acknowledged as terrorism? Slavery was and still is the biggest atrocity of the human race. Those monstrous acts still leave lives shattered today. The Queen, or anyone with the internet, can trace her white or black ancestors pre-slavery. Descendants of enslaved people find it almost impossible to do this, as we have no or extremely little detail of our ancestors. Unless we are fortunate enough, like Alex Haley, to have those details passed down to us through generations. It's not about the money, it's about the principle. The world needs to wake up and realize that slavery was a mass genocide, a million Holocausts, a million September 11th, a million 7/7s. It was the biggest enormity with vicious acts and cold-heartedness the world has ever seen. Yet the world turned a blind eye. Life has definitely changed for black people as a race and as a culture. This time it has changed for the better. However, the slave trade still has an impact on life today. Look at Liverpool. Racism began because of one race feeling superior to another. Due to slavery, white people felt they were superior to black people because we were only slaves. Institutionalized racism still exists right here today. Look around you. Liverpool has beautiful architecture and wonderful buildings that are here as a result of the wealth the slave trade brought to Liverpool. Look at the huge red brick houses around the city that Liverpool is so well known for. This whole city was built off the slave trade's back. So for hundreds of years, black people have suffered in this city. Why is the only building we as a community have the Caribbean Center? Why do we not have a grander building in the city that is rich in architecture to relax, learn and achieve in? For black people to bring their families and friends of any color to enjoy. My people were never slaves. They were enslaved. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest